Hello class, hope you're doing well today. In our last session we talked about the history of evolutionary thought and Darwin coming up with this idea of natural selection, and also Wallace coming up with natural selection, which is the main driving force behind evolution. Today we're going to take a look at some of those a little bit more depth in the driving forces behind evolution. So let's get started. When we look at the agents of evolutionary change, there are really 5 main agents of evolutionary change. The first one of these that we'll take a look at, and again, these are outlined in your book, but I want to go over them because they are indeed very important for us, is mutation. So realize that mutations are random changes to DNA that occur every time a cell divides. At least in human cells, there are some changes to the genetic code. And some of these may have no effect whatever. Others of these may result in some enzymes or changes in the characteristics of the organism. So realize that mutation is very important because it is the ultimate source of all genetic variation. All the genetic variation that we see, whether it's due to eye color, hair color, height of individuals, the ability to taste various substances, these are due to mutations that have arisen in your ancestors' past. So here we have the DNA. Some agent, mutagen in this case, is going to change one of the bases within DNA, and that is then a mutation, and that change can be passed on from one generation to the next. So this is the idea of mutations. If you want more information on the nature of DNA, please don't hesitate to ask, and we can talk about that in more detail. So where this comes into play is, let's take a look at bacteria. So if we have some bacteria, as bacteria divide, some of them will have mutations. There will be mutations, and that's just going to be the way that it occurs. Some of those mutations may be lethal and cause that cell to die. Other of those mutations may allow that bacterium to then use some other substance as a food source that no bacteria had been able to use before, and that would give that bacteria an advantage. Some of those mutations may allow that bacteria to be resistant to antibiotics. And here we can take a look at various mutations that have occurred in fruit flies, for example. We can have mutations that cause changes in eye color, eye shape, or whether they could even produce wings or not. So those are some of the common mutations in fruit flies that are studied. So mutation, the ultimate source of all genetic variation. Very important. Next agent we have is this idea of gene flow. Now gene flow is really about movement of alleles from one population to another. So as individuals, so let's say we've got one population of blue individuals over here, one population of red individuals over here. If they're able to move back and forth, as these red ones move over, they're going to carry those alleles, those traits for that red color into this population. And likewise here we see the same thing with deer, where if there's an opening between these in this mountain range, then you can have this population, some of those individuals moving over here and carrying traits with them. So they might carry the trait for a darker coat color. They might carry a trait that allows them to be resistant to some parasite, which is common over here. Or maybe these ones are coming over here and they carry the traits that allow them to more efficiently use food sources. So gene flow helps beneficial traits move from one population to the next. So this is a very important process in evolution. Next, we can take a look at what is your book calls non-random mating. This is also referred to as sexual selection. In sexual selection, this is about mate selection. And this is a very potent force in evolution. In fact, this was quite problematic for Charles Darwin because he would look at these brightly colored birds or other insects and such and think, well, that really doesn't help that organism survive. Why would these birds be so brightly colored? If they're so brightly colored, predators would be more likely to remove them from the gene pool. Ultimately, the males tend to be more brightly colored because the females are selecting for a mate. And that's where this sexual selection comes into. So females tend to select based off of quality of individuals. And to determine the quality of an individual, they use oftentimes coloring or behaviors as a measure of the genetic quality. So when we're talking about genetic quality, if this individual was not able to effectively obtain food, if he was had poor nutrition, then he wouldn't have the energy to produce this bright coloration. So he would not be brightly colored. Or if he was maybe susceptible to some parasite, he wouldn't have the extra energy to produce this bright coloration. Where an individual who is able to obtain food and avoid parasites will have the extra energy to produce this bright pigmentation. And thus, that is a way that females select for the best males. Maybe this is also seen through dances and the likes. So what traits the females look for is really a genetic condition that they inherit from their parents. Now, what this is also telling the female is that he is not only brightly colored, but he's such a badass that he can be brightly colored and avoid predators. So as she's looking for a mate, she wants a mate that can obtain food, avoid predators, avoid parasites. Those are the things she's looking for, and he's got that. Just like this bird has got that. Here's we're taking a look at the peacock spider. He's got that. Okay. When we look at males often are selected for competition. So here we have males competing with one another for mates. Now, one of the things you'll note is that Miss Bird here, she is not brightly colored. And this really gets into the idea that males and females have very different mating strategies. Typically, at least when we're looking in the animal kingdom, for the most part. Females, since they are laying the eggs take a huge amount of energy to produce, and she can only produce a few of those eggs each year. She has to go out and get all the food to make those eggs. She's got to fly around with those eggs inside her until she hatches. After she lays those eggs, she has to carry those eggs around until she lays those eggs, Then after she lays the eggs, she may have to sit on those eggs and so forth. She has a massive investment in this. Take a look at humans. What's the minimum investment if we compare a male versus a female? Certainly, a female has a minimum of a 9-month investment in that baby. And certainly beyond that, because once you have a baby, you can't just send it off to fend for itself, right? You got another, 10-year investment. Some might joke that an 18 or 20-year investment in that individual, all right? Now, males, on the other hand, if we look at this bird here, typically throughout the animal kingdom, males have a strategy of mating with multiple females. So this male could mate with multiple females as long as he could impress them and have those mating opportunities. Certainly his minimum investment is perhaps the short period of having sex, copulation, and the small amount of sperm that is passed off. So those are some of the various differences in terms of sexual selection that can lead to the males and females being quite different from one another. Not all species are like that, however. So that's the idea of sexual selection.